This is the Daily Brief, one landmark court decision explained in plain English every day. Presented by FindCourtCases.com, this is your daily briefing on the law that shapes American life.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a dispute from 1803 that, frankly, sounds like a clerical error.
Right.
It was about four men who just wanted their job commissions delivered. But if you look closer, the actual stakes in this fight couldn't have been higher.
They absolutely define the American system. I mean, what was truly at risk here wasn't just a handful of bureaucratic positions.
I know.
Justices of the peace in D.C. This was a direct, hostile proxy fight over who truly controlled the government.
And more importantly, who gets the final say?
Exactly. Who gets the final supreme word on interpreting the Constitution? The Supreme Court, or, the elected officials in the other branches.
This sounds like political dynamite.
Yeah.
You have President John Adams, a staunch Federalist who had just lost this bitter election to Thomas Jefferson.
A Democratic Republican and a completely different vision for the country. And Adams knew he was leaving power, but he was not going quietly.
Not at all.
Not at all. In the final hours of his presidency, Adams essentially tried to colonize the judiciary.
That's a great way to put it.
He made a flurry of last-minute judicial appointments, hundreds of them, including William Marbury and 3 others, to ensure Federalists would retain control over the law.
Long after he was gone.
These were the infamous midnight appointments.
And you can just imagine the incoming administration was livid.
Oh, absolutely.
When Thomas Jefferson finally took office, his Secretary of State, James Madison, essentially declared war on these lingering Federalist appointments by just refusing to deliver the papers.
It was a transition of power that turned into constitutional brinkmanship.
So who actually won here?
Well, the immediate result was that Marbury lost his commission, which is a small personal loss. But the ultimate winner was the Supreme Court.
How so?
Through this single case, it gained an unprecedented foundational power that fundamentally reshaped how American government operates.
So Marbury lost his job, but the Supreme Court won the ability to challenge Congress and the president.
Yes.
That's why we still feel the heat of this argument today, right? In every major constitutional ruling.
It all comes back to this.
So our mission today is to figure out how this squabble over a piece of paper created the principle of judicial review.
But we need to dive deep into the facts, the holding, and the reasoning behind Marbury v. Madison and trace that lineage.
Let's start the story. We have to set the stage. The world before the conflict was this tense, nail-biting political handoff.
The setup is key. Just before John Adams's term ended at midnight, he nominated Marbury, along with Dennis Ramsey, Robert Townsend Who, and William Harper.
All to be justices of the peace. The Senate approved them, right?
Approved them quickly.
And according to the source material, the appointment process was almost complete. The Senate advised and consented, the commissions were signed by President Adams, and they were officially sealed.
That sounds like the job was done.
Legally it was. But here's the snag that fueled the entire crisis. The physical delivery. Actually putting the paper in Marbury's hand.
It just didn't happen before the stroke of midnight.
Jefferson's team wasn't about to play nice.
No. When James Madison took over as the new Secretary of State, he looked at these stacks of Federalist commissions sitting in the office and basically said, no, thank you.
He just refused to hand them over.
Exactly. So you have these appointees who, on paper, had a completed, signed, and sealed legal right to a 5-year job.
But they had no physical proof, no access to the office. They couldn't do their jobs.
They had the right, but Madison was physically withholding the evidence of that right.
So Marbury, being a good Federalist, didn't just walk away. He escalated things. He petitioned the Supreme Court directly.
And he wasn't asking for money. He was seeking a very specific legal remedy.
That remedy was a writ of mandamus.
A writ of what? Let's stop right there. For listeners who haven't dealt with legal jargon, how do we translate a writ of mandamus?
Yeah, let's break that down.
Think of it like a mandatory do-your-job order from a court.
Okay.
It's a formal command forcing a government official, Madison in this case, to perform a specific, clear duty that they legally owe to an individual.
So no wiggle room.
Right. No discretion. Marbury was saying, Madison, you have a non-negotiable duty to deliver this document. The court needs to force you.
So it's the legal equivalent of the court saying, stop wasting time and send the memo, Madison.
Pretty much. And the court proceedings themselves must have been dramatic.
I bet. The Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice John Marshall, was questioning the executive branch directly.
Remarkable doesn't cover it. Marshall actually called officials from the Department of State, Madison's own subordinates, to testify.
Wow.
It was the judicial branch looking directly into the cabinet of the president and demanding information. This showed immediate political courage.
Okay, that brings us to the first major hurdle the court had to clear. Did Marbury actually have a legitimate legal right to this commission in the first place?
Right, since it wasn't delivered, the court, with Marshall speaking for a unified bench, said with a powerful yes.
And what was their reasoning?
What's fascinating here is how the court separated the legal act from the physical delivery. They determined that Marbury had a vested legal right because the appointment was completed the moment the president signed it and the seal was affixed.
So delivery really was just a technical detail.
Precisely. Marshall ruled that delivery was a mere formality and not necessary to complete the appointment. The right was established.
So withholding it was a clear violation.
An undeniable violation of Marbury's established legal right.
That distinction, the legal right existing even without the paper, is crucial.
It is.
Which brings us to the second question the court had to tackle. Did the law actually provide a solution or a remedy for this wrong?
The court strongly affirmed that, yes, the law must provide a remedy. This is a crucial philosophical step.
Why is that so important?
They reasoned that the fundamental principles of civil liberty guarantee a remedy for every legal wrong. If you have a right, and that right is infringed, the government has to provide a way to fix it.
Otherwise, rights are just meaningless words on a page.
Exactly. And to make this work, the court had to draw a razor-sharp line between two types of executive action: political powers and ministerial duties.
Okay, what's the difference there?
Political powers involve high-level discretion. Think of the president negotiating a treaty. The courts generally stay out of those.
And ministerial duties?
Those are things bound clearly by specific laws, no room for judgment, like a clerk's duty to record a deed.
Or in this case.
Or in Madison's case, the Secretary of State's duty to deliver commissions that have already been properly signed and sealed. The court said that was a ministerial duty.
Okay, so this is where the story gets really interesting and shows the tactical genius of Marshall. The court said, yes, Marbury is right, Madison is wrong, and yes, the law says he should have a remedy.
And that remedy is mandamus.
So why, after establishing all of that, didn't Marbury get his job? Why wasn't Madison forced to deliver the papers?
This is where the brilliant jurisdictional trap comes in. Marshall suddenly pivots to the third and ultimately devastating question.
Which was?
Could the Supreme Court issue that specific writ of mandamus in this specific case?
Wait a minute. They just said mandamus was the appropriate remedy. Now they're saying they might not be the right court to issue it.
Exactly. Or, well, not exactly. What they found was a jurisdictional barrier. The court looked at the law Marbury was relying on.
The Judiciary Act of 1789.
Right. This act purported to grant the Supreme Court what's called original jurisdiction, meaning the power to hear the case first.
Without it going through lower courts.
To issue these writs of mandamus to federal officials, so Congress tried to give the Supreme Court a power. But Marshall then directed the court's attention to the Constitution itself, specifically Article 3.
And the Constitution is very specific about the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction.
It's explicit and narrow, and those instances, like cases involving ambassadors or states, did not include a simple dispute between a citizen and the Secretary of State.
That is the pivotal point. Marshall reasoned that Congress, in passing the Judiciary Act, had tried to expand the Supreme Court's powers beyond what the Constitution allowed.
And since the Constitution is the supreme law,
Congress can't contradict it. I see the trap now.
Precisely. Marshall is concluding that the section of the Judiciary Act of 1789 that gave the Supreme Court the power to hear Marbury's case was itself unconstitutional.
So they struck down a federal law for the first time in history.
For the very first time. The court concluded that Congress had acted inconsistently with the Constitution. And because of that, that part of the Judiciary Act was void.
Wow. So they're essentially saying, Marbury, you are legally correct. Madison is ethically and legally wrong.
Yeah.
But the specific tool you asked us to use is illegal.
So we can't help you. That is the ultimate holding in one sentence. The court could not issue the writ to Madison, even though Marbury was entitled to the commission, because the law that gave them that power was unconstitutional.
And that single conclusion established the power that defines the modern Supreme Court.
This is the core takeaway. If you remember nothing else, remember this. In Marbury v. Madison, the Supreme Court established the power of judicial review.
The authority of the judiciary to declare a legislative act void if it conflicts with the Constitution.
That is huge. It essentially says that Congress can pass all the laws it wants, and the president can enforce them.
But if those laws go against the Constitution, a court can simply erase them.
Yes. The court articulated this by saying, it is emphatically the duty of the judicial branch to say what the law is. When a law conflicts with the Constitution has to win.
Otherwise, it's just a suggestion.
Exactly, not binding law.
But wait, for a Federalist judge, Chief Justice Marshall, to declare a Federalist law unconstitutional, that must have been shocking. What was the political calculation here?
This is where we see Marshall's genius. If he had ruled that the Judiciary Act was fine and then ordered Madison Jefferson's Secretary of State to deliver the commission,
Madison would have just ignored him.
He almost certainly would have. Jefferson believed the executive branch should have the final say on the Constitution.
And if the executive branch had ignored the Supreme Court's order, the court would have looked completely powerless.
It would have crippled the young judicial branch, maybe forever. So Marshall found a way out. He avoided a direct, unwinnable fight with Jefferson.
He gave up the small Win Marbury's job to claim the massive foundational power.
The authority to interpret the Constitution itself and check the other branches.
It was a strategic retreat that won the war.
It was. He didn't rule against Marbury's right. He ruled against the court's jurisdiction to grant the remedy. It was the perfect escape route.
Asserting power without inviting immediate retaliation.
The ruling framed itself strictly as a matter of jurisdiction.
We have to acknowledge the controversy here, though. People still debate whether the Constitution explicitly grants the judicial branch this power.
Oh, that debate is still very much alive. Critics say Marshall just asserted this power out of political necessity,
rather than finding it clearly spelled out in the text.
Right. Did the framers really intend for 9 unelected officials to have the final say on laws passed by elected representatives? It's a fundamental question.
But Marshall settled it.
He settled it in favor of the judiciary, affirming its role as the guardian of the constitutional text.
So why are we still talking about this 1803 case today? How does it show up now?
Because this 1803 decision is the foundational authority for every single time the Supreme Court strikes down a state or federal law.
Every time.
Every modern debate about the limits of government, healthcare, gun control, elections, it all relies on the principle from Marbury v. Madison.
It's the origin story of modern constitutional law, built on a failure to deliver 4 pieces of paper. Let's quickly summarize the journey.
We started with a dispute over undelivered commissions. The court walked through 3 steps. First, Marbury had the right. Second, the law provided an appropriate remedy. The writ of mandamus was the correct tool.
But third, and most critically, Marshall showed that the Supreme Court lacked the constitutional jurisdiction to grant that remedy.
Because the Judiciary Act that gave them that power conflicted with Article 3 of the Constitution and was therefore void.
And the resulting enduring principle was judicial review.
That's it.
So what does this all mean for the long game? This case ensures that the Constitution is a binding higher legal framework.
And that the courts are the final arbiters of its meaning.
Right. If the Constitution is the supreme law, something has to check the other branches when they overstep.
The provocative thought to leave you with is this. If the court had decided differently, if Marshall had just focused on getting Marbury his job,
and ruled the Judiciary Act was constitutional,
they might have won a small battle for a few jobs, but they would have lost the constitutional war to establish the judiciary as an equal limiting branch of government.
And you have to wonder, would the Constitution still be the supreme enforceable law if the courts lacked the power to say, this law goes too far?
That's the question.
Marbury v. Madison is the reason the words written in 1787 still carry authority in our lives today.
You've been listening to The Daily Brief, one landmark court decision explained in plain English every day. Presented by FindCourtCases.com, this is your daily briefing on the law that shapes American life. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with the next case.